Aos Epstein Files, não é verdade? The Horrifying True Story of Jeffrey Epstein. Lá vamos nós outra vez. Let's go, 30 minutos.
Millionaire, businessman, friend to the stars.
Pá, já vi tantos vídeos destes que já perdi.
Jeffrey
Já perdi a
Epstein moved
conta.
effortlessly among presidents, princes, Nobel laureates, and tech billionaires. He dined with arms dealers and media moguls with rumored intelligence ties. But was it charm and wealth that opened those doors, or something darker behind the facade? Today on the Infographics Show, we're going beyond the headlines to uncover the real Jeffrey Epstein. On Saturday, July 6th, 2019, in a joint FBI NYPD sting, agents took a sledgehammer to the door of Epstein's $77 million Manhattan town.
Mas não sou eu que tenho que ir a essas merdas, mano. Quem tem que ir a essas merdas são os gajos que investigam. Eu não estou a investigar isto, bro. Eu estou só a ver.
House, and to the illusion he had built around himself. Inside the opulent, high-tech mansion, then the most expensive single private home in New York, they found thousands of lurid images, a cache of photos tracking Epstein's decades of abuse. Sexualized objects were everywhere, explicit paintings, provocative statues, a massage table, sex toys, and bottles of lubricant. On the shelves, a first edition of Lolita. In his office, the Marquis de Sade's The Misfortunes of Virtue. These weren't just eccentric collector's items, they were clues. But more revealing was the mountain of CDs and hard drives, clear evidence of Epstein's perversions, and possibly leverage for blackmail. There were framed photographs showing him with tech titans Elon Musk and Bill Gates. In one frame, a dollar bill signed by Gates himself with a cryptic message scrawled across it, "I was wrong." Other photos put Epstein alongside Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, former U.S. President Bill Clinton, President Donald Trump, British billionaire Richard Branson, Pope John Paul II, Mick Jagger, Fidel Castro, even the public intellectual Noam Chomsky. A who's who of global influence posing with a man concealing one of the darkest secrets of the modern era. Security cameras dotted room after room, and those were just the ones you could see. A victim later said the house was wired top to bottom with hidden cameras feeding a central security room. It was hard not to wonder if Epstein recorded powerful people in compromising situations. One New York Times reporter later wrote that Epstein had boasted, off the record, about being a collector of dirt on the world's high and mighty. And as if it couldn't get any stranger, the house displayed a large painting of Bill Clinton in a blue dress and red high heels, a nod to the Monica Lewinsky scandal. It was later falsely rumored that Epstein also owned a painting of George W. Bush by the same artist, showing him in the Oval Office with a paper airplane beside toppled Jenga blocks, a reference to 9/11. Whatever the truth.
É que houve gente a dizer que isto era verdade, mas isto pelo visto era porcaria, esta conversa.
One thing was undeniable. Epstein had a dark and unsettling sense of humor. And he was very, very rich. The Manhattan townhouse was just one of many properties. He owned a 70-acre private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Little St. James, better known as Epstein Island. There, according to workers and victims, the rich and powerful mingled freely with beautiful women. In 2023, an American financier paid $60 million for it.
Esta também é uma beca estranha.
Apartment near the Arc de Triomphe and a Palm Beach estate. He was also the owner of Great St. James in the Virgin Islands, where he had started work on a compound he was expanding at the time of his 2019 arrest. In New Mexico, he held a 7,500-acre ranch that he named Zorro. His modes of transport weren't just luxury, they were central to his life and his crimes.
Ninguém descobriu nada no rancho.
Jets, and for longer
É que aquele rancho deve estar cheio de corpos.
The so-called Lolita Express. Together, the aircraft were worth an estimated $25 to $30 million. He also kept 2 helicopters and a small fleet of luxury vehicles, 7 Chevrolet Suburbans, a cargo van, a Range Rover, a Mercedes-Benz sedan, a Cadillac Escalade, and a Hummer II, to name a few. Across his properties, high-end furniture and expensive art were everywhere. One home was even designed by a French interior decorator known for working with royalty. It all pointed to serious money. And that was just what he let people see. His exact net worth was unknown, but it certainly ran into the hundreds of millions, maybe even over $1 billion, as his lawyers would later claim. In 2025, Senator Ron Wyden released a partial summary indicating banks that had flagged more than $1.5 billion in suspicious Epstein-linked transactions. It detailed thousands of wire transfers running from the early 2000s through 2019. The money moved through a network of offshore entities, Russian banks, women from Eastern Europe, Israeli tech companies. It was a long trail. And this was a man who started as a math teacher, who somehow landed a job at a prestigious school without
Mano,
a degree.
este gajo é o Walter White do mal. Genuinamente.
3. In 2008, following his first arrest for sex crimes, he received what's been called a sweetheart deal.
Yeah, eu sei,
it
eu
wasn't
sei.
just the deal of a lifetime, but one that seemed to defy belief and
Pois é, o problema é
undermine
que
the
ninguém
US
sabe o que
justice
é
system.
verdade e o que é que não é.
Despite
mano.
investigations showing that he had trafficked dozens of
Só
victims
sabe aquilo
to
que é
his Palm Beach
legalmente
mansion,
já
he only got
verificado.
an 18-month sentence, and not the kind that any other inmate will ever experience. Instead of state prison, he was sent to the Palm Beach County Stockade. At his lawyer's request, he was first placed in a separate dorm, and then he moved to the Stockade's infirmary. The infirmary had never been staffed before, but for Epstein, men and women were hired to fill it. A captain even ordered his cell door left unlocked and arranged what the media called liberal access to a private attorney's room with a TV.
Meu
Many of his
Deus, bro.
victims were poor, recruited from local high schools with the promise of easy money.
Ai, o quê,
Within
bro?
months, he was out on work release for up to 12 hours
okay.
a day, 6 days a week, even though offenders like him are not supposed to get that privilege.
Oh, minha
Deputies
Nossa
assigned to
Senhora,
him
bro.
were told to wear suits and repeatedly referred to him as the client rather
client.
than inmate. He paid the sheriff's office about $128,000 for
quê,
this
mano?
bespoke security while
Epá,
he
é
worked
só
at a
corrupção,
non-profit
puto.
office that he had created, an office deputies helped him find. Epstein always claimed to be a man of the arts and study. He also claimed to be doing humanitarian work as a global philanthropist.
Claro.
But in truth, his
Claro que faz
foundations were a
sempre, trabalho
smokescreen,
humanitário.
a front to obfuscate the reality of his life. As the New York Times would say, his fake charity was an image boost built on deception. If he did donate, it was for selfish reasons, and he
Claro.
often exaggerated how much he
Não
gave.
acho nada estranho
On those
nisso.
work release days, deputies sat at the reception desk while he met visitors behind closed doors. Logs of these visitors were later destroyed. Deputies were instructed to greet him on arrival, and at least 9 times he was allowed to go to his Palm Beach house. This wasn't just bending the rules, it was throwing them out the window. He used his own driver, stacked up dozens of outside appointments, and made at least 69 doctor visits in 6 months. He was being treated like a VIP, and that was just in Florida.
Como é que é tudo?
Just one of the properties where he
Tô,
took
mano,
his
este canal
victims.
tá incrível.
Yet, in a pattern that would repeat itself, when detectives searched the house, the computer equipment and hard drives were gone. A detective later said in a documentary that it was obvious Epstein or someone protecting him had been tipped off and removed the equipment. Epstein's longtime Palm Beach butler, Alfredo Rodriguez, had the infamous Little Black Book. Almost 1,600 names, 5,000 phone numbers, and thousands of emails and home addresses. Celebrities, scientists, politicians, oligarchs, princes, and princesses. Rodriguez said he was intimately familiar with his boss's depraved routines. He claimed he saw a lot of nudity around the pool, regularly cleaned and put away sex toys after Epstein's massages, and saw disturbing content on Epstein's personal computer.
Meu
But
Deus.
because he tried to sell the book to lawyers for $50,000 instead of giving it to law enforcement, Rodriguez was sentenced to prison. 13 months later, he
bro.
died of cancer at the age of 60, and he
Epa.
wasn't the only one. In the years after
Epa,
Epstein's first
curioso.
arrest, more than 24 people closely connected
Curioso, tipo, 13 meses de prisão e depois morreu. Ficou doente.
to him or his crimes would also die. Some were young, among
No.
them at least 3 victims and a former cellmate, fueling the conspiracy theories that followed. The evidence and testimonies of the victims could and should have sent Epstein away for years.
Pois é, bocado
Alexander Acosta, then the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, negotiated a federal non-prosecution agreement with Epstein's legal team. The deal granted Epstein immunity from federal prosecution, and unusually, this extended immunity to any potential co-conspirators. The Justice Department's internal watchdog later wrote that the agreement was intended to end the ongoing federal investigation. In effect, the FBI's probe was shut down and the slate wiped. No
Okay.
federal charges were brought, and the agreement meant prosecutors didn't have to publicly name anyone involved.
Meu Deus.
According to the Daily Beast, a former White House official later claimed that Acosta told Trump transition interviewers, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." Still, in the Justice Department's 2020 review, investigators asked Acosta directly if he had any knowledge of Epstein being
Mano, eu acho
intelligent.
genuinamente que aquilo que se passa com isto é. Este gajo é tão. Este gajo é tipo. Tem tanta merda de tanta gente, bro. Que estes gajos, se lançarem informação cá para fora, é o colapso da sociedade americana, bro. Genuinamente. Sociedade americana e no geral, acho. Acho que é o colapso da sociedade mundial. Se isto acontecer. É tanta porcaria que deve estar nestas cenas que eles nem querem lançar.
Intelligence asset. He said, "No, and the review reported no evidence of the contrary. Even so, something seemed very rotten in the state of Florida. State Senator Lauren Brooke didn't like what she had seen, telling the media they are supposed to uphold the law regardless of who a person is, how much money they have in the bank, or who they had on their airplane. But this was America, where money doesn't just talk, it can drown out every other sound. His sudden death in a jail cell on a night when the cameras mysteriously failed and 2 guards reportedly fell asleep raised serious doubts. And when a second autopsy said it looked like he had been murdered, even casual observers began to wonder if something far darker was at play. To understand what wasn't right, we need to shine a spotlight on his life. Epstein was born on January 20th, 1953 in Brooklyn, New York, the first of 3 children. His mother was a homemaker, his father a park attendant and gardener. They never had much money, but to friends and neighbors they seemed like a happy, well-liked family. Jeffrey attended a working-class school where he skipped 2 grades and graduated at just 16. He was smart, often making money on the side by tutoring other kids. He was described as a slightly nerdy, chubby kid who excelled at math and playing piano. He certainly wasn't the kind of boy who anyone ever expected would one day get involved with serious crime. He studied at 2 universities, including NYU's Courant Institute of Mathematical Sciences, but never graduated. Despite this, he still managed to land a job in 1974 teaching math and physics at the prestigious Dalton School on Manhattan's Upper East. The likely reason, he may have lied on his resume. An alternative theory is that he was groomed as an intelligence asset, but there is no evidence for that. He might also just have been smart and impressed the interviewer. Regardless, Dalton was where New York's elites sent their children. It was the kind of place where old money ruled, where you found the who's who of New York high society.
Já percebemos como é que o gajo chegou lá, não é? Como é que é aquilo?
Just before Epstein joined Dalton, the headmaster was Donald Barr, the father of William Barr, the future attorney general who oversaw the Justice Department when Epstein's 2007 sweetheart deal was reviewed. Officially, his contract ended the day before Epstein's began, but staff later suggested Barr may have been the one to hire him, as he was known for bringing in unconventional teachers. Still, there is no hard evidence connecting Barr to Epstein beyond coincidence. Long before Epstein's crimes came to light, he was already rubbing shoulders with powerful men whose children would grow up powerful too. As for his teaching, accounts were mixed. Some former students remembered Epstein as smart and charismatic. Others described him as smarmy, sleazy, and unqualified. Several recalled how he surrounded himself with girls outside of class, something they found inappropriate. There was a mild sense of creepiness, one said. So there he was, a poor kid whose talents had pole vaulted him into the rarefied world of New York's elites. He made a name for himself, and not only for academics. In 1975, the Dalton paper wrote that at a PTA event, Mr. Epstein proved himself to be the ivory showman on the piano. He made sure to impress those wealthy parents, including Alan Ace Greenberg, the chairman of the investment bank Bear Stearns. After 2 years, Epstein left Dalton. Some accounts say he resigned, others that he was let go because of poor performance. Epstein soon landed on Wall Street.
É que nunca nada se sabe sobre este gajo concretamente, mano. É bem estranho. Tipo, ninguém sabe exatamente o que é que acontece.
Bear Stearns under the guidance of Alan Greenberg. The firm prized PSDs, poor, smart, with a desire to be rich. Epstein advised clients on tax implications of their portfolios, saving them money. He was an expert at finding loopholes, and he would spend the rest of his life living inside them.
Mas é que nem foi a universidade. Isto é uma escola secundária. É um colégio privado. As pessoas mais ricas nunca contabilizam dinheiro vivo ou riqueza como joias. Há muita gente diferente ricos para caralho que nós nem estamos bem a par, pois.
Just 4 years later, the Wall Street Journal printed the name Jeffrey E. Epstein as one of the new limited partners at the firm. That was the same year that he was featured in Cosmopolitan magazine as the Bachelor of the Month, the first of several articles that would be published about him over the years, discussing his many talents. The Cosmopolitan story said this 27-year-old maverick was a financial strategist who talks only to people who make over $1 million a year. The short write-up called him a New York dynamo who was seeking a cute Texas girl. Money and sex were seemingly already the chief motivations of his life. In 1981, Epstein left Bear Stearns. It's not certain why, but according to one of his former associates, it was because he had been discovered executing illegal operations. Epstein would later deny this, and the evidence is lacking. For a while, he became a fixer, a financial bounty hunter, helping wealthy people get back money they had lost to fraud. It'd been reported that during this period, he would brag about being well-connected. He certainly wasn't the archetypal financial expert. Among his possessions were fake passports, allowing him to move around the world under a cloak of anonymity, a criminal act that requires powerful connections. One Austrian passport featuring his real photo but a false name even listed his residence as Saudi Arabia. One of his clients was the Saudi businessman Adnan Khashoggi, a billionaire and arms dealer. Nicknamed the Great Gatsby of the Middle East, he threw lavish parties for the rich and powerful. Known to royalty and wealthy American businessmen, Adnan Khashoggi played a central role in the Iran-Contra affair, the U.S.-led covert arms trafficking to Iran, with profits funneled to arm the cocaine-funded Nicaraguan Contras. Through a clandestine network he called the Safari Club, what some critics dubbed as a second CIA, Khashoggi was deeply entangled with Western intelligence. He also maintained strong ties to Israeli intelligence. None of this proves Epstein worked for any intelligence service, but it does show that he moved in circles that often overlapped with people who did. Chief among them was the disgraced British media mogul Robert Maxwell. Over the years, records and reporting have him linked to MI6, the KGB, and Mossad, though definitive proof of his status as an asset has never surfaced.
Como é que vocês são gajos linked a estas três organizações? Tipo, é estranho.
So, the UK Foreign Office suspected Maxwell was at least a double agent, and probably a triple.
Triple
Stephen
agent.
Hoffenberg, founder and CEO of Towers Financial Corporation, later claimed it was he who introduced Epstein to Maxwell. He also alleged that the British intelligence had hired Epstein, but Hoffenberg made those claims from prison after being convicted of running a $450 million Ponzi scheme. Epstein worked for Hoffenberg as a consultant and would later be called a co-conspirator and architect in his scheme. Nonetheless, Epstein was never charged, and there was no proof Hoffenberg was right about what he had said about Maxwell and British intelligence. As a consultant, Epstein was earning about $70,000 a month in today's money, at least on paper. Records show that at the time, Epstein had to borrow $700,000 to make a $1 million investment on top of the $300,000 he already had. It suggests he hadn't yet reached the level of mega wealth that he would later flaunt. Whether he profited from the Ponzi scheme is unclear, but it's hard to believe his claim that he wasn't even aware of it. By the 1990s, he seemed to come into money fast. His management firm, J. Epstein & Co., soon claimed to handle the assets of the global elite. The operation grew quickly. At one point, he had 20 accountants and a slew of assistants who people later said always seemed very young and very attractive. To onlookers, the office could look more like a harem than a place of trading. He boasted that he took only clients with over $1 billion. A mere $800 million would get you a snub, which was and still is completely unheard of in financial circles. As one friend put it, I sent him a $500 million client and he wouldn't take him. The account was too small. Who those clients were has never been revealed, and how Epstein truly made his fortune remains murky. As one veteran investment manager put it, the trading desks didn't seem to know him. It's unusual for animals that big not to leave any footprints in the snow. If Epstein really amassed vast wealth, his business left no public trace, not even in Bloomberg. All Epstein himself admitted was that people had entrusted him with very large sums of money. Beyond that, there's no evidence that he ever earned clients millions or billions through his legendary trading skills. Epstein did have one known billionaire client, Leslie Wexner, the L Brands and Victoria's Secret chief. With power of attorney over Wexner's fortune, Epstein may have enriched himself. But that alone doesn't explain how he amassed so much wealth, enough to sit on prestigious boards or to casually write a $9.1 million check to Harvard, funding what became the Epstein Program for Mathematical Biology and Evolutionary Dynamics. As for Wexner, entrusting his wealth to a man he barely knew, it just didn't make sense. One Wexner executive later said, almost everyone wondered who Epstein was. He literally came out of nowhere. A former employee said that he was that mysterious person that everyone was scared to death of. Yet no one understood how he'd been handed the keys to the kingdom. The two men went from strangers to thick as thieves. The Manhattan townhouse, it ultimately passed from a Wexner-controlled entity to Epstein for a nominal sum after Wexner had paid around $13 million for it in 1989 and spent millions more on renovations. Epstein later moved the property to his Virgin Islands company, Maple Inc., for $0. Epstein also invested alongside Wexner in the ultra-high-end New Albany development in Ohio, where Wexner had an estate. One victim later said that she was sent there, and Epstein kept a mansion of his own nearby. By then, there were already complaints about Epstein posing as a Victoria's Secret talent scout and abusing the association. a role he never officially held. As early as 1997, a young woman reported that he had interviewed her under that pretense. This was the first time that anyone went to the police about Epstein's sexual misconduct. Police investigated and called it a he said, she said scenario. They later said the victim withdrew the complaint, something she has always denied. In time, Wexner accused Epstein of misappropriating vast sums of money. Wexner and his wife were in turn sued by shareholders who claimed that they had allowed Epstein's influence to grow unchecked. Even months after Epstein's 2008 conviction, their financial ties had not been fully unraveled. It would take another 18 months before Epstein was finally cut out of Wexner's business life. It was clear Epstein did what he wanted. That included a long-running partnership with French modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel. Epstein bankrolled Brunel's MC2 model management. A victim later said the agency functioned as a front for trafficking women. In 2020, a year after Epstein's death, Brunel was arrested in Paris on suspicion of serious sexual misconduct and trafficking. In 2022, he too was found dead in his jail cell. His death in custody didn't involve sleeping guards or faulty cameras, but it certainly added fuel to the theories that were now burning holes in people's minds. Some of Epstein's money and access may also trace back to Robert Maxwell, father of Epstein's longtime partner and accomplice in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell. Robert Maxwell was a Holocaust survivor who fought with distinction in the British Army after the Nazis killed his entire family. After the war, he built a sprawling media empire, operating in a world where business, politics, and intelligence seemed to blur. Over the years, he'd been alleged to have had contacts with MI6, the KGB, and Mossad, with claims that some of his companies doubled as fronts. But Maxwell's career ended as mysteriously as it began. In 1991, he was found dead after falling from his luxury yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, in circumstances still considered suspicious to this day. Soon after his death, investigators uncovered that Maxwell had looted hundreds of millions from his company's pension funds, leaving thousands of British workers destitute. His daughter Ghislaine, already close to Epstein, rejected the inquest's conclusion that her father had simply suffered a heart attack, fallen overboard, and drowned. With her father gone, Ghislaine's presence at Epstein's side only grew, helping to cement his image among the elite. In 2002, New York Magazine dubbed Epstein a man of mystery, one of the most dazzling single men in New York. How he made his fortune was anyone's guess, and had been for years. A decade earlier, in 1992, just after he began appearing...
O que é chocante neste caso é tipo, o quão years back isto vai. Sabem, tipo, isto não é uma merda que aconteceu desde 2010 ou 11. Isto é uma merda que aconteceu desde, sei lá, 1900 e troca ao passo, bro.
With Ghislaine,
percebem?
The British tabloid
É isso que é
Mail on Sunday asked,
estranho.
but what is he? Property developer, concert pianist, math teacher, corporate treasure hunter, stockbroker, merchant banker, or globe-trotting businessman? He was known for flying Nobel Prize-winning scientists on his private jets. And around the time of that New York profile, he even took actors Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, along with former US President Bill Clinton, on a trip to Africa aboard his customized Boeing 727, nicknamed later the Lolita Express. One of his most regular visitors to the New York townhouse was Ehud Barak, former IDF Chief of Staff, Defense Minister, and Israel's Prime Minister from 1999 to 2001. Barak visited repeatedly. In one note, he called Epstein a collector of people, adding, "You are like a closed book to many of them, but you know everything about everyone." Epstein also cultivated ties with Prince Andrew, the wayward British royal. As New York Magazine put it, most everyone on the street has heard of him, but nobody seems to know what the hell he's up to. And that, the article suggested, was exactly how Epstein liked it. What was known is that Epstein spent significant time in London and traveled constantly, logging around 600 flight hours a year. He was often accompanied by young women, allegedly brought along to surface VIP passengers. When at home, he dressed casually, and most mornings began with a long yoga session with his personal instructor. After that, he might be meeting the Trilateral Commission or the Council on Foreign Relations, both circles he moved in, or he might be out with the rich and famous. But he never drank. He didn't like drugs or alcohol. What he did like was schmoozing. Asked about Epstein in 2002, Donald Trump said, "I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy." One victim later said that she was recruited after being spotted while working at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, but how close the two men actually were remains disputed. Author Michael Wolff has said Epstein told him in a 2017 interview, "I was Donald's closest friend for 10 years, and that Epstein called him the Trumpster." Trump has called those claims smears. Wolff says he recorded more than 100 hours of interviews with Epstein and has seen compromising photos, but he hasn't released the tapes and no such photos have surfaced. If Epstein did have compromising material on past and present politicians, the fallout could cut across the political spectrum. Wolf's view is that the case is too hot to handle, a scandal that could stain American politics on both sides. But Wolf's credibility has long been questioned, with critics pointing out his history of factual errors. In fairness, Epstein's VIP connections don't make them all guilty of anything by default.
Claro.
But for
Como é
sure,
lógico.
Epstein did collect rich, brilliant, and powerful people the way others collect rare art.
Aqui em Espanha há uma teoria ou linha de raciocínio que tudo teria começado por ele ter arranjado um sugar daddy idoso. Que era esse homem que depois de uns anos acusou de ter roubado 30 milhões. O quê, bro?
Favorite was Bill Clinton. Epstein once called him the world's greatest politician.
Claro.
And Clinton returned the compliment, describing Epstein as a highly successful financier and committed philanthropist.
A
As
cena é que este
noted,
gajo
the
também
two traveled to Africa together
tinha
on
spots
what
em
were
todo
said
lado.
to be humanitarian trips for the Clinton Foundation, talking about how they worked on combating HIV and empowering the poor. Clinton said via a spokesperson, "I especially appreciated his insights and generosity." If that's true, there was a very different side to Epstein than the person his victims talked about. Had Epstein fooled Clinton or something worse? In 2019, like Trump, Clinton said that he knew nothing about Epstein's crimes. US media reported Clinton flew on Epstein's jet as many as 26 times during 6 separate trips, sometimes without Secret Service on certain legs. It's also been alleged he took Epstein's helicopter to St. Thomas. Clinton denied he visited the island, contradicting the testimony of now deceased victim Virginia Giuffre. To date, however, there is no physical evidence that either Trump or Clinton committed crimes. Also, Ghislaine Maxwell was recently reported
Obrigado,
stating in
28, man.
transcripts
Thank you
that
very much,
no
man.
illegal activity ever
Muito obrigado.
happened regarding Trump or Clinton. Whatever the case, the facts available show us Epstein moved among incredibly powerful people. Back in New York, he often hosted afternoon tea for his VIP guests. Manservants in black jackets and white gloves guided guests past bizarre paintings and even a tray of prosthetic eyeballs before leading them to the so-called leather room.
Bro, what the
Their
fuck?
leopard skin chairs faced a painting of an exotic woman smoking opium while stroking a snarling lion skin. None of his meetings were mentioned in his emails. He rarely emailed anyone, once saying, "I like to hear voices and see faces when I interact."
Pois
He
claro.
rarely ate out with people too, calling the habit like eating on the subway. People who knew him said he was almost pathologically private. Even in the phone book, he used a pseudonym. He was described as an iceberg. What you saw was not the whole deal, not even close. He wanted people to think he was an enigma, when the reality was far more prosaic. He was a rotten criminal, hiding in plain
Pois há.
sight. He played the man of mystery part, all the time playing people like they were pawns on a chessboard. Even when the net was closing in on him,
Mas como é
his
que este
untamed
gajo,
ego
bro,
made
filho
him
de um-
believe he was always one
filho
step
tipo
ahead.
de uma-
As for
pessoas
Ghislaine, the
de
queen to
origem
his
humilde.
imaginary kingdom,
Como é
no
que este
one
gajo
ever
chegou a isto,
really
bro?
understood how close they were. She was said to be his soulmate, yet they didn't live together. She was often intimate with him, yet he almost always surrounded himself with other females. Oxford educated, she was said to be funny and articulate. If he was the quiet manipulator sitting at the boss's table, she was the PR department. She
Pois.
was also a conduit to Britain's elites. But the friends list didn't stop there. Epstein had ties to Democratic Senate leader George Mitchell, who once said, "I would certainly call him a friend and a supporter." He met with Bill Gates on numerous occasions,
Meu Deus,
including after his initial arrest. He met with former CIA Director William J. Burns. He counted Nobel Prize winners Gerald Edelman and Murray Gell-Mann among his acquaintances. He was also friendly with the former president of Harvard, and he moved in the same circles as Woody Allen, Michael Jackson, and David Copperfield. It's hard to know who joined in Epstein's circus of depravity and who was just another name in his little black book. Whether they joined in or not, anyone around Epstein could see he was almost always surrounded by women. One acquaintance recalled that many seemed foreign and dressed a little bizarrely. At one cocktail party Ghislaine Maxwell organized for Prince Andrew, a guest later admitted she was horrified by the number of weirdly dressed Russian models.
Epa.
To those who suspected he was up to no good, he acted untouchable. His message to digging journalists was stark. When journalist Vicky Ward interviewed 3 girls who'd become Epstein's victims for a Vanity Fair story, he threateningly told her, "That makes me unhappy." He subsequently attacked her integrity, even sending fake letters allegedly from Ward's witnesses to the editor. Maxwell delivered similar threats to girls and women who thought about speaking out. One woman, whose complaint about what happened to her and her sister was ignored by law enforcement, said Maxwell warned her that her life would be destroyed. She moved home several times, yet Maxwell somehow always found her and kept calling her at home, making it clear that they knew where she was. In 2025, the same victim sued the Justice Department, the U.S. Attorney's offices, and the FBI for negligence in failing to help her and her sister. She's the witness who said Epstein once showed her the surveillance room in his New York townhouse. Monitors on every room, the beds, the bathrooms, the entire house. So who was Jeffrey Epstein? Ari Ben Menashe was a former arms dealer and ex-Israeli military intelligence officer. He later turned whistleblower, exposing the murky world of covert geopolitics. And he has claimed that Epstein did in fact work for Mossad, the same agency he alleges assassinated Robert Maxwell. He said Epstein was intelligence. He was running a classic honey trap operation, and yes, Mossad was involved. In Ben Menashe's telling, Epstein's life was carefully engineered to ensnare the powerful, with the compromat stored away in a Mossad archive. If true, it would be a wrecking ball for countless careers and for the public's trust itself. Until concrete evidence surfaces, it's impossible to say if Epstein was an intelligence asset. And when it comes to his alleged clients, more proof is still needed. After all, there is always reasons that someone might want to smear someone else. As for the so-called client list, Ghislaine Maxwell has flatly insisted it doesn't exist. She also said there are no videos that could be used for blackmail from Epstein's surveilled properties. Still, she isn't exactly regarded as trustworthy among the world's public. Her contention that sexually inappropriate contact between Epstein's guests and in-house masseuses never happened and contradicts victims and witnesses. What we can say is that he began as a working-class kid obsessed with money and became a mass abuser of females. The Venn diagram of Epstein's life overlaps with covert geopolitics and men whose decisions shape the world, but as far as public records show, there is still no confirmed proof he was acting as a blackmailer for any intelligence service. At least not yet. The truth may be out there, but it could be so incendiary that even if partly exposed, it could start a fire that's hard to extinguish. For that reason, if the theories are true, it is highly likely they will never come out in full. Now that you know who Jeffrey Epstein really was, the bigger mystery remains. Why can't we see the full truth?
Mas ainda há mais, bro. Estes gajos estão mesmo a surfar nesta merda, bro. Tipo, the real reason the Epstein list will never be released. Who gets all Jeffrey Epstein's money after he's dead? Ai, como caralho, bro. Este também é bom.
Hey,
12 minutos. Podemos guardar para ver depois. Porra, malta. É que vamos mesmo surfar nesta série toda. Como é que é, Branquinho? Estás bem? Minha Nossa Senhora.